Hi, this is Ryan, and I'm currently staring at a cardboard box that takes up half my living room floor. It's a $2,000 flagship soundbar system, 11.1.4. That's 16 individual speakers crammed into a piece of dark gray plastic the width of a snowboard, two surprisingly heavy rear blocks, and a subwoofer that vibrates the floorboards before you even turn the volume past 20. And for the last week, I've been trying to figure out why a $150 Vizio from Walmart actually handles human dialogue in Dune Part 2 better than this $2,000 monolith does. It doesn't make sense, right? You spend a premium to fix the awful, tinny speakers built into your paper-thin OLED, and you end up with a system that somehow makes deep male voices sound like they're echoing from inside a Tupperware container under your TV stand. If you're hovering over the Buy Now button on a high-end soundbar, stop. There is a fundamental flaw in the physics of how these premium systems divide up frequencies, and the math just doesn't add up. Before we get into why your TV might literally refuse to talk to the $2,000 audio gear you just bought, and if you appreciate not getting played by spec sheets, hit subscribe. We need to answer a very uncomfortable question. How exactly does a company get away with claiming sound is coming from your ceiling when the actual speaker is sitting flat on your media console? So I hauled this thing up the stairs, and my first physical impression before even plugging it in was just exhaustion. The box is shaped like a giant L, which is impossible to carry through a doorway, and inside there's enough styrofoam to insulate a small shed. Once you get it all unwrapped, you're looking at the main bar. I'm looking at it right now. It's 54 inches wide. It practically swallows the top of my IKEA Besta cabinet to the point where it's actually hanging off the edges. The top is covered in this tight, premium-feeling acoustic mesh, which, side note, I discovered on day 2, is an absolute magnet for cat hair and dust, and you can't wipe it with a wet cloth without ruining the fabric.
But setup is supposed to be the magic part of these premium bars, right? One single HDMI cable from the bar to the eARC port on the back of your TV. You plug the subwoofer into the wall, you plug the rear speakers into the wall, no running speaker wire under the rugs. You turn on the TV, there's a satisfying little relay click from the bar, and a tiny white LED matrix display hidden behind the front mesh scrolls the words eARC, Dolby Atmos. It feels great. You feel like you just hacked the home theater experience. I fired up Blade Runner 2049, the opening scene with the synthetic farming. If you know it, you know it. The bass drop hits, and the wireless subwoofer on the floor absolutely pressurizes the room. My coffee table was visibly vibrating. It's loud. It's impactful. But then people start talking. And this is where I started leaning forward on my couch, squinting at the TV like something was broken. Let's look at the physical hardware of the bar for a second. It is incredibly sleek. Barely 2.5 inches tall, so it doesn't block the bottom edge of your TV screen. But you can't negotiate with the laws of physics. To make a speaker that thin, the actual drivers inside, the cones that push the air, have to be tiny. We're talking maybe the size of a key we have. Actually, let me back up for a second. It's not just about the size, it's about what that size forces the system to do. Small speakers simply cannot push mid-bass frequencies. They don't have the surface area. So the soundbar's internal computer has to make a choice. It takes all of those lower frequencies, the punch of a gunshot, the roar of an engine, and crucially, the deep resonance of a human voice, and it reroutes them. It dumps them to the massive black box sitting on the floor, the subwoofer. Now, I haven't measured the exact crossover curve in $1 million anechoic chamber or anything, so grain of salt, but I spent an hour running raw frequency sweep tests from YouTube right here in the living room. Right around 150 hertz, the audio from the slim bar just sharply drops off and the subwoofer takes over. Here is why that completely shatters the illusion. Human hearing is incredibly good at localizing where sounds come from, down to about 80 hertz. Anything lower than that, like an earthquake rumble, is omnidirectional. You just feel it in the room. But 150 hertz, your brain knows exactly where that is. So when Ryan Gosling starts speaking on screen, the sharp treble parts of his voice are coming from the sleep bar right under his face. But the chesty, resonant weight of his voice is physically booming out of a 30-pound box sitting next to my bookshelf. His voice is literally split in half across the room. It sounds detached. It sounds artificial. And that's just the dialogue. I haven't even touched the main reason people spend $2,000 on these things, the promise of 11.1.4 channels, the Dolby Atmos ceiling bounce. If you look at the top of the bar, you see these angled metal grills. The marketing says these upward-firing drivers shoot an audio beam off your ceiling and bounce it down to your ears so it sounds like a helicopter is flying overhead. Okay, but look at my ceiling. It's standard drywall, but there's a ceiling fan in the middle of the room, and my couch is pushed against the back wall. For that audio beam to perfectly hit my ears, the angles have to be mathematically flawless. If you have vaulted ceilings, or acoustic popcorn texture, or an open floor plan, that sound wave doesn't bounce cleanly. It scatters. It just washes the room in loud, muddy noise. You are paying a massive premium for an acoustic ideal that almost no real-world US living room actually supports. But muddy Atmos and weird dialogue aren't even the things that almost made me box this entire system back up and drive it to UPS. Audio quality is subjective. What happened on Tuesday night wasn't. Tuesday night, I just wanted to sit down, eat some takeout, and watch Shogun on Hulu. I grabbed my Apple TV remote, pressed power, the TV clicked on, the screen lit up, the soundbar did nothing. I pressed volume up, the TV displayed a little gray circle with a slash through it in a corner of the screen. I grabbed the actual soundbar remote, which, just as a quick aside, feels like a hollow $5 piece of plastic you'd get bundled with a cheap LED light strip, not a $2,000 of premium audio gear. I hit the power button manually. The bar woke up. The little display said TV ARC. Still zero sound. I ended up having to pull the TV out from the wall, wedge my arm behind the panel, yank out the stiff, braided HDMI cable, wait 10 seconds, and shove it back in. Only then did the audio suddenly kick in at a blaring volume. This isn't a fluke. If you dig into the long-term ownership data, not the day one honeymoon reviews, but the people who have lived with these flagship bars for a year, this is the single most common reason they get returned. You think you are buying a speaker system. You aren't. You are buying a highly temperamental networking device that relies on a protocol called HDMI CEC. Actually, wait, that's not the right way to put it. The soundbar itself isn't the sole villain here. It's more of a hostage. HDMI, eARC, and CEC are supposed to be universal standards that let your TV and your audio gear talk to each other, so you only need one remote. But LG, Sony, Samsung, Hisense, they all write their handshake software slightly differently. They do not play perfectly together. So you pay $2,000 to eliminate the clutter of a traditional AV receiver, but what you save in physical speaker wire, you pay for in daily infuriating software friction. When you have a traditional receiver and passive speakers, an HDMI handshake failure doesn't brick your whole setup. The amp just pushes analog power to a magnet. But here, the software is the hardware. If the digital handshake fails, your $2,000 speaker is a paperwork. And the wireless instability doesn't stop at the HDMI cable. Let's talk about that giant subwoofer again. On Wednesday afternoon, I was working at my dining table listening to Spotify through the bar. Every 5 or 6 minutes, there was this tiny, distinct pop. Just a split-second gap in the bass. I walked over and put my hand on the subwoofer chassis. I watched the little green connection LED on the back panel. Solid green, then a quick flicker, and the bass dropped out. Why? Because my Eero Mesh Wi-Fi router sits about 3 feet away from the TV stand. Almost all of these premium soundbars use a proprietary 5 GHz wireless signal to talk to their subwoofers and those heavy rear surround speakers. You know what else uses a 5 GHz signal? Your home Wi-Fi. In a dense apartment building or a house with heavy internet traffic, they are actively fighting for airspace. The interference causes micro dropouts. I literally had to buy a longer Ethernet cable and move my router across the room so the bass wouldn't stutter during a song. It's supposed to be a wire-free utopia, but the invisible wireless traffic jam makes it more fragile than just running a copper cable under a rug. But the industry knows this stuff is a nightmare. They know the handshakes fail and the wireless drops. Their solution? Brand lock-in. If you've shopped for a TV in the last 18 months, you've seen this. If you buy a Samsung TV, the salesperson will tell you to buy a Samsung bar to use Q Symphony. If you have a Sony, you need a Sony bar for acoustic center sync.
They market this as a massive upgrade. They claim it uses the TV's internal speakers together with the soundbar to create a massive unified wall of sound. I tested it. I turned it on, calibrated, and sat in the sweet spot. You know what it actually does? It introduces a microscopic maddening phase delay. The cheap downward-facing plastic speakers inside the TV panel cannot physically match the speed, the crossover frequency, or the acoustic warmth of the dedicated soundbar drivers. They are fundamentally mismatched pieces of hardware. So when someone speaks, it sounds like their voice is slightly smearing across the room. It gave me a headache after 20 minutes. They are selling you a feature that actively ruins the audio phase just to scare you into buying all your hardware from the same logo. So the dialogue is detached, the Atmos bounces are entirely dependent on drywall geometry, the software requires hard reboots, and the wireless signals fight with your router. Which brings us to the obvious question. If I'm holding my own credit card, what do I actually buy instead? Look, I'm not saying this $2,000 system sounds completely awful. When it actually works, when the router isn't choking the subwoofer connection, and when you're watching a perfectly mixed 4K Blu-ray instead of a compressed streaming show, it gets incredibly loud. It vibrates the couch. It does the cinematic party trick. But loud isn't the same as good. And paying $2,000 for a system that actively fights you on a random Tuesday night, that's where I draw the line. So here's the reality check. If you have $2,000 burning a hole in your pocket for home audio right now, you are standing at a fork in the road. And almost everyone is being funneled down the wrong path by spec sheets that read like science fiction. If it were my $2,000, I wouldn't buy a flagship soundbar at all. I just wouldn't. I would go on Amazon right now and buy a $500 Denon AV receiver. Then I'd spend maybe $600 on a pair of decent passive bookshelf speakers, something like the eARC Debut 2.0s. You pull those out of the box, and just feeling the dense weight of the MDF cabinet, running your thumb along the thick rubber surround on a massive 6-inch woofer, you instantly realize why the plastic soundbars sound so painfully thin. You strip a 1/2 inch of bare copper speaker wire and screw it down into the heavy metal binding posts on the back of the receiver, and you're done. No firmware updates to fix a broken HDMI handshake, no 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi dropouts, no proprietary app required to adjust your treble. And the dialogue? It comes out of a driver large enough to actually replicate the resonance of a human chest cavity punching right through the mix. It's an analog connection. It works today, and it will work in 15 years. I know you're probably thinking, yeah, but I don't want a giant metal amplifier and cables cluttering up my living room. I get it. I really do. My TV is mounted on a bare wall, and I hate visible cables as much as anyone. I haven't tested every single architectural setup out there, so grain of salt, maybe you physically cannot fit a receiver in your media cabinet.
If you're strictly forced to buy a soundbar because of space constraints, aesthetic rules, or living in an apartment, you still shouldn't spend $2,000. The law of diminishing returns in the soundbar market hits a concrete wall at about $500. I actually hooked up a $450 Samsung Q700C right after unboxing this flagship beast. It's sitting in my bedroom right now. Guess what? The dialogue clarity is 90% as good. The physical bar is just thick enough to house decent center channel drivers. More importantly, it doesn't have those detachable battery-powered rear surrounds that come with the high-end tier, which, by the way, those lithium-ion batteries inside the premium wireless rears, they will permanently degrade in 3 to 5 years from the constant dock and undock charging cycles. I keep calling it a premium ecosystem, but what I really mean is it's disposable tech. You are buying a ticking clock. A good mid-range bar just does the core job. It makes the TV louder, clearer, and deeper without trying to trick you into thinking you have a commercial movie theater hiding in your drywall. The consumer audio industry has done an incredible job convincing us that we need to spend thousands of dollars to fix the genuinely terrible audio on our ultra-thin OLEDs. They created the problem by shrinking the TV bezels, and now they're selling us a highly temperamental, flawed solution at a massive markup. Don't buy the $2,000 compromise. Either build a real stereo system that will outlast your next 3 televisions, or spend $500 on a solid mid-range bar and keep the remaining $1,500 in your bank account.
If this saved you from a very expensive headache, hit subscribe. I'm going to go try and stuff this giant subwoofer back into its styrofoam coffin before UPS gets here. See you in the next one.